Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome back to another episode of Shardless Summons. The Mad Hatter Fusion is just getting started, and we are in pursuit of the fragments for the Epic for the Fusion from the Champion Chase, but I have no intention of pulling any shards this session. If we take another look at my Fusion Planner spreadsheet, which I did cover in my Fusion Plan video for the Mad Hatter, check it out in the card up above if you haven't seen that already. I essentially had a rethink about my shard pulling strategy for this Fusion because the Champion Chase amount was a lot lower than I expected. Granted, it was on par exactly with the Thor Fusion, which was also a hybrid style, but nonetheless, I thought it was going to be a little bit worse than that previous precedent. One thing I did forget to mention is that from an efficiency standpoint, considering the fact that this is 2x Sacreds on this Champion Chase, there is a summon rush where people typically use sacred shards on top of there being a bonus summon rush. If you wanted to truly minimize the amount of sacreds you'd have to use over the course of the entire fusion, then pulling the entirety of your sacred shards over the bonus summon rush, which would be up to an estimated 11 sacreds, would be generally speaking cheaper than pulling 6 sacreds here and then up to 5 sacreds for the Champion Chase, depending on how far you intend to go in the Champion Chase. With good RNG, in fairness, you could get to the 55-50 with 5 sacreds, but with bad RNG, the worst you could possibly do is 5 epics in a row, which would leave you only at 1250, meaning that you would still have to pull more than the allotted 11, which would be, in theory, the guaranteed return for the bonus summon rush. But another aspect to consider for my particular situation is my proximity to Mercy for voids and sacreds. My voids are in a good spot where essentially I'd be willing to burn the 25 to 30 voids it would take to maximize the fragments in a normal summon rush if there's a favorable progressive chance event. And then if we got no legendaries from those summons, then I'd be willing to go all in on the next progressive chance for some void legendary that I'd like to have and pull up to 50-ish voids to guarantee and hit Mercy to try my luck at getting that void legendary champion. For the sacreds, the other thing to consider is that for the Thor Fusion, the bonus summon rush also coincided with a sacred POGO event, and as you can see here, we're not really in the ideal state for getting there. And so because I do intend to get the fragments from the Champion Chase without having to pull any shards, it's not going to affect these numbers, and it leaves me with the flexibility to use voids and or sacreds depending on what's being offered in both of the summon rushes. Now obviously if I elect to skip the primary summon rush, then I'm stuck with whatever is being offered in the bonus summon rush, and thus I'd be forced to use my sacreds and or voids at that point. And so what that leaves me with is a couple of chances to have ideal scenarios, one being that I pull only voids during this progressive chance events on the first summon rush because there's some offering of champions. I don't have to pull my sacreds and I take a chance of getting a cool void legendary. And then I could decide if I wanted to gamble on the bonus summon rush, knowing that I have the shards to do so if need be, and potentially skip some of the other events going on near the end. Or another ideal scenario could be that we don't like the void offerings in the first summon rush, so I do end up pulling the 6 sacreds just to guarantee that both summoning events are done, and then I still have the option to be better set for a POGO event if that does happen to happen, and then I could still skip some of the other events because I know that I'm pulling for this one, and I'd have a better shot at hitting the POGO event because I'd be into Mercy at that point, having pulled 6 sacreds. We're 5 away at the moment. Pulling 6 would put us 1 shard into Mercy. So we already saw the milestone in the Fusion Planner, but here it is in the Champion Chase tournament itself, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that there's technically also some of the event relic fragments forge materials here being offered up for grabs, and to me these aren't really worth chasing that much because I kind of see relics the same way that I saw blessings when they came out, where it's just a nice embellishment on top of what your champions already do. In most cases, blessings and or relics are not going to make you do content that you couldn't do before. Rather, they just enhance what you could already do, make it faster, more efficient, make you hit harder, etc. And so personally, I don't really think it's worth trading shards just for chances at potential upgrades to save a little bit of time or do a little bit more damage in one particular area of the game. That said though, I am still going to try to get all the way out here to 3,000 points just so we can get ourselves that first legendary tome without having to pull a single shard. And for that, let's head on over to the portal where we can fuse a bunch of champions to add up to the 3,000 point goal. Now it is no secret on my account that I have tons and tons of previous fusion champions as well as some Dune Tower champions that I've just never summoned over the years because I don't really have a purpose for them on my account. And having these is also one of the reasons why I typically advocate for going for fragment summons, even if they're not a desirable champion, just because they are worth 500 points at least in a champion chase in the future. That said, most of the ones I'm pulling today are not just for the sake of the points, they are champions I hope to use in the Cursed City in the near term. The first of which being Thea the Tomb Angel, the first Doom Tower hard champion. Yes, she's been out for years and I've had her for years and I've never ever summoned her, but my intention here is hopefully to take advantage of this passive. She's been on enemy waves in the Cursed City and it's really annoying that she just attacks and you get a bunch of true fears out there, and she hits relatively hard, so I do believe I can easily hit 30% on enemies in the Cursed City, and so it's just a chance for some extra CC on an attack-based champion, which I've always said is one of the hardest stages to do in the Cursed City because attack-based champions are extremely squishy and they're hard to keep alive, and when the enemy mobs take a turn, it is very easy easy for you to get wiped. So Thea is first, and we bank our first 500 points by summoning her from the portal. The second champion that we're going to be looking at in a similar fashion, Doom Tower Champion, is right underneath her, which is Basatha, who honestly doesn't see that much play in the game overall, but he is HP based and he does have an AoE stun, granted on a 5-turn cooldown when unbooked, but for the purposes of RNG in the Cursed City, that's probably more than you need. So HP based rooms are kind of hard just because there's a lot of champions are not HP based, but more importantly, there's very, very few control champions that are HP based. So having an AoE stun obviously is inherently useful, but it can also provide healing and strengthen, so we can take less damage and we can heal up if we do take damage ourselves. So kind of a no-brainer there, but another Doom Tower champion. I believe he's the third one or the fourth one. I forget exactly which of those, but that is another 500 points in the champion chase banked. And then the third one that we're going to be summoning today is Gerda Bogbrew. Once again, Cursed City potential champion. She has poisons on the A3 and then potential to place more poisons and or weaken on the A2. And she is a support, and support stages, they're not necessarily hard to do in the Cursed City, but they can be really difficult to deal damage and not just, spam A1s and have a little bit of control. So having a champion who can place some poisons out there, it's pretty nice in order to get some DPS out of the way. But also she does have a little bit of turn meter suppression, where whenever an enemy receives a debuff on her passive, the turn meter is decreased by some amount. So you pair her with a bunch of supports that have debuffs, and you're also going to be controlling the enemy waves with turn meter. So that's another 500 points from Gerda Bogbrew, everyone's favorite raid waifu. Now, after this, I want to note that technically speaking, we have achieved enough points for the sake of the fusion. So we could stop here, but again, my goal is to go all the way out to the first legendary tome at 3,000 points. So from then on, we move to the epics. I have C's in here. He's just a daily login reward champion along with Gerda Bogbrew, who's also daily login reward. But I just haven't summoned him over the years, and epics are just worth a little bit less. So this one is purely for the points. I have no intention of using C's at all on my account, but we banked another 250 points. And then jumping back to the more utility summons, Sabbatha is of course the fusion epic, so we do need to summon copies of her for the purpose of going for the Mad Hatter, so this is beneficial. And there's also a champion training event going on right now, so we might as well double dip by champion training her a little bit, because we need to do that for the purpose of the fusion anyways. I didn't really talk about her that much in my Mad Hatter fusion plan video, but I do think she's a pretty serviceable epic in her own right. So if you decide to not go for the fusion, I think she's a pretty decent pickup. You can just do 4 of the events along the entirety of the duration of the fusion and be able to fuse her up fairly easily. But yeah, for my purposes, we've banked another 350 points for the fusion. So from here, I think we're at 2100 points, so we still need 900 to go, but we are not done fusing a bunch of stuff. Technically speaking, I do have Lady Mikage as well. This would be my second Lady Mikage. My first one I happened to get lucky from a remnant summon, and so I've been saving this 1000 points for some future state, but in this case, it doesn't really feel that necessary. So we're going to opt instead for a Relic Keeper copy, which of course you can get from fusing all of these rares together and paying a little bit of silver, but we bank that is another 250 points. And then on top of that, I do have 2 Broadmaws that we can summon as well, and they are going to be Void epics, so they are going to be 350 points each. So all of that combined should equate to us being, I believe, at 3050 or 3050 points. So then we have achieved the legendary tome from the champion chase without having to use a single shard, which is fantastic. So what is kind of cool about this whole thing is that even though I did use a decent amount of my resources for this purpose, a lot of saved up fusions, so to speak, I still have a lot more that I could use in the future. Obviously, we mentioned Lady Mikage, but I also have 8 remnant summons, which at the very least could give you 250 points for an epic and up to 1000 points if you happen to get lucky with a mythical. And so those are pretty good sources of points in champion chases in the future. And then of course, every other legendary that we have here in the portal. So there's plenty of options. There's plenty more opportunities for me to do more shardless summons in the future. And that's just a good situation, a good place to be in, I think, just to have, once again, the flexibility to kind of pick and choose when you really need to use your shards and when you don't. And this kind of plays into the fact of why I have so many shards at my disposal, as you can see here, just because I have a lot of situations like this one where I don't really have to pull any shards and I can still get exactly what I need from the events and tournaments. So speaking of the tournament, let's hop over to the champion chase. And if my math is correct, we should be at the first legendary tome with a little bit of overshoot because, like I mentioned before, there is some champion training. So I have pulled some amount of mystery shards. but legendary tome acquired. We also get the bonus fragments or whatever, the epic fragments for the relic thing. We get the epic fragments for the fusion, and then we get some energy and some gems, which is pretty nice. So energy is going to go towards champion training, as you might suspect, and more specifically towards champion training up the epic that we got for the purpose of the fusion. All right, so there you have it. Fusion epic fragments achieved from the champion chase, on top of getting the legendary tome as well, without having to pull a single shard. Let me know in the comment section down below what your plan is relative to shards for the purposes of the Mad Hatter fusion. Were you influenced to change it by the fact that the milestone was so low, or the fact that they're offering some of the relic crafting materials in the champion chase itself? As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel. And also, if you're enjoying the content on the channel, feel free to hit that subscribe button down below as well. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.